Yeah, so this might be the first ever case to use a dog to help solve. It's certainly one of the first. So last week I was reading this book by this local author called Stephen Horton, local to me, England. And it's called Liverpool Murders, Kirkdale Hanging, 1870 to 1891. And in this book it talks about how between 1831 and 1867 31 people were hung publicly at a Kirkdale jail, which is not far from where I live. And the crowds ranged from like 500 people to 100,000 people, depending on who it was who was being hung. Now, certainly in America, in states where the death penalty is still a thing, it's mad to me because we haven't had the death sentence since the 1960s in the UK. And it's mad that like there was a jail dead close to me where it publicly hung people. So, like I said, between 1831 and 1867, 31 people were hung publicly. Now, the Capital Punishment Amendment Act of 1868 put an end to public hangings, and they still happened, but they were done in private. But like, people would say that they'd be passing the jail and they'd hear the trapdoor, which is a bit, even going to see a public hanging to me is a bit like, I don't know if I'd want to. So between 1870 and 1892, 29 people were hung. At this Kirkdale jail. Now, after 1892, the hangings still happened in private, but they were all moved to our local jail, our local prison, which is Walton Prison. The last one being 1964. So the one case in this book mentioned, like, this book details all the people who were hung there and what the crimes were, and one person stood out to me. His name was William Fish Jr. and he kidnapped, raped, murdered and chopped up a little girl. You know, he was eventually caught and then he was brought to Kirkdale jail where he was hung. And like I said, this is one of the first cases to involve a dog. Bear in mind it's the 1800s. Okay, so William Fish was described as Blackburn's Sweeney Todd. His name was William Henry Halliwell Fish Jr. and he was born on April the 1st, 1851 in Darwin. His dad was William Fish Sr. who was born in Chorley, which isn't too far from where I live, and he worked as a block printer. Unfortunately, he died prematurely in 1867. And this was 10 years before his son murdered this little girl. William Jr., who I'm talking about, he would have been about 15 at the time. Which, you know, it's quite young to lose your dad. Not much was known about his mother because back in them days women didn't matter anyway. But what we do know is that his mum's name was Martha. Another important thing about when William was younger, he fell from an aqueduct and he banged his head really bad. He had to have, it was a bad accident he had to have 3 bones removed. Now what's weird is the amount of killers, serial killers or just killers, who have all had a head injury as a child is mental. Like, there's a lot of evidence that shows if you bang your head, you can damage certain parts of your brain, which can lead you to committing these types of crimes. I mean, just off the top of my head, you know, Fred West is one. I mean, there's so many throughout America, throughout the UK. So when I found out that he banged his head, it really made me ears prick up. So the rumours are, after William Senior died, it's rumoured that Martha died quite soon after of a broken heart, which is really sad. But it left William and his siblings at the perils of the state, and in them days you were sent to a workhouse where, you know, it was basically slave labour and pure abuse of these poor kids. The workhouse, which I don't like at all, but they said that he was a man of low repute, which meant he weren't thought of very highly. He was classed as a nobody, a poor person, just a nothing, very dehumanising. Now the first time he concretely appears in the records was in 1871, and it was a census. He was 20 at the time. He was living as a lodger in Blackburn with Chadwick and Jane Branwell. They lived with their nieces and nephews, and there was also another lodger who lived there. The next time he appears in the records is October 30th, 1871, and it's a marriage record from St Michael's Church in Blackburn, and it said that he's married to a woman called Elizabeth Green. Within the next 5 years, now this bit annoys me, I hate researching because, like, some records say that over the next 5 years he settled into marriage and he had 2 kids. Now I found another article that says he had 3 kids, and it's like, why can't these people, these reporters or these historians, just get the basic facts right? It annoys the crap out of me. So unfortunately I don't know if he had 2 or 3 kids, but I'm going to go with 2. He also began working as a barber, hence why he's known as Blackburn Sweeney Todd. I've got loads of notes, sorry if I'm looking down and it's annoying you. So by 1876, he had his own shop at number 3, remember this, number 3 Moss Street. But his reputation was still low, even though he was now a business owner and he had a job and a wife and he was a father. And, you know, in the Victorian times, even if you did better yourself in life, if you were still, you know, poor, orphaned, brought up in a workhouse, you were still deemed as like nothing in Victorian times. He also had a criminal record with 2 counts of larceny, which is like theft. But when you're poor and you've got nothing, especially back in them days, you're talking the 1800s, where, you know, sometimes you needed to steal in order to survive, to eat, because it weren't like today where people these days say that they're poor, but compared to them days when poor was really poor. So I didn't really hold too much on them 2 counts of larceny, especially for them times. So the little girl he murdered, her name was Emily Agnes Holland. She was 7. Now she lived at 110 Moss Street with her parents. Now remember, on Moss Street, that is where his shop is. She went to the local school, which was St Albans School. Her dad was called James and he was a mechanic, and her mum was Elizabeth, and she stayed at home and looked after the home and the kids. It was said that Emily was really popular and she had lots of friends, and she loved to like play out in the streets with them. She was also really helpful, and if you needed like little errands running, she'd happily do it. So on Monday, March 28th, 1876, Emily told her friends that she was running an errand for the man. Now she said this man was a friend, which makes me think, had he done this before? Had he asked her to do errands before? Had he, what we now call grooming, had he had an eye on her for a while? So she was going to go for the errand to get this man, her friend, some tobacco, but unfortunately she never went back to her friends. A 12-year-old Mary Ellen, she claimed to have seen Emily about 4 p.m. On Bailey Street, and Emily told her the same thing, that she was going to the shop to get her friend some tobacco. She was later spotted with a man who was described to wear a mixed cloth coat, a billycock hat, a yellow waistcoat, dirty black trousers and clogs. The shop Emily went to was called Mr. Cox's Ginger Beer Manufacturing and Grocer. And 2 little boys were working in the shop, and they remembered serving Emily with the tobacco. So we know that around 4 o'clock she was on her way to get the tobacco. We know that she got the tobacco, and we also know that she was later seen with a man. When Emily's dad got home that night from work as a mechanic, he discovered that Emily still weren't home, and he phoned Lancashire Police and said, "My daughter is missing." On March 30th, a Mrs. Alice White, who lived at number 73 Bastwell Terrace, she was told by a child that there was a strange parcel that had been dumped near the cemetery. Now, Mrs. White, she was intrigued, and she went over to the cemetery with the kids to see what it was. So wrapped in these copies of a newspaper, the Preston Herald, was the torso of a young, small child. It was bloody, headless, armless and legless. So the police came and collected the parcel. They searched, they couldn't find any of the other body parts. Emily's mum, this bit really makes me sad. Emily's mum recognised, she had to go and identify this torso of this little girl, and she recognised it as Emily. She said, you know, exactly the same size as Emily, and Emily was really quite skinny. And yeah, she said, "It's definitely my Emily." So back then the pathologist was a police surgeon, and his name was Dr. Maitland. He said that it was quite obvious that she had been raped before she was killed. Her thigh bones had been smashed and her legs had been cut off. He said it would have been a large knife or the sharp knife that would have done it. Her windpipe had been severed with 2 cuts. One had gone right through the neck bone, severed in the head. He also noted that the newspaper and her torso was covered in hair, which led police to suspect the killer was a barber. So the next day, 31st of March, Emily's legs had been found in a drain in Rishton, which was 4 miles away. A man called Richard Fairclough claimed he'd spotted this man who was acting dead weird, and he was like he'd left something. So the man went over, Richard went over to investigate. He found 2 little legs wrapped up in the Preston Herald. Dr. Maitland confirmed that the legs were definitely Emily's. So also on March 31st, an inquest into Emily's death was opened. By now, Emily's murder had made national news, which back then in the 1800s is a big deal, because, you know, the network that we have today weren't there, but it still made national news and it shocked the people of Blackburn. Hundreds of people, local people, newspaper people, all went to Blackburn's town hall where the inquest was being heard. Now, for some reason, it was raised in the inquest that the suspect must have been a tramp. Now, 2 kids, one was aged 8, one was aged 9, said that the man was really, really scruffy. Now, this idea suited the stereotypical Victorian views on criminals, that like only low-life vagrants, homeless, tramps could do something so heinous. It was also pointed out by a police officer in the inquest that tramps don't keep back copies of newspapers. The back copies, now bear in mind this is 1871, March 1871, and these newspapers were from November the 10th, 1875, the 11th, 18th and 25th of March 1876. But the higher ups in the police disregarded this evidence. Now the police done what they still do to this day. They went out and arrested loads of usual suspects. So they arrested a street beggar called Charles Taylor, along with 11 other men, and the police were quite desperate. So April 6th, still nothing, and the British government offered an award of £200, which in today's money is £20,000, which is quite a good reward. Search parties were like created to try and find the rest of Emily's little body. Everywhere was searched cesspools, gutters, sewers, nothing. So the inquest resumed on April 7th, and all the men who were arrested were all released because there just weren't any evidence, because they didn't do it. So anyway, they were all released. The final post-mortem gave police precise time of death. It also found that there was no internal bleeding of her heart or lungs, which suggested that her throat was cut first and then she was beheaded. Potato and figs were found in her stomach, and with the witness statement, it put the death between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m, which we know because, you know, the 12-year-old girl last seen her at 4 p.m, around the same time she went to the shop. So, after the final post-mortem, Emily's remains were given to the family and she was finally able to be buried. But Dr. Maitland still felt that the hair that was found on the torso and the newspapers was key to the case. And he found that the hairs were all different shades and all different lengths, and that it was being cut. They hadn't been torn. So on April 8th, it was reported that the police had searched William Fisher's barbershop, but they didn't find anything. By now, the police had accepted that the killer was definitely a barber. And, you know, the people of Blackburn started to suspect Fish as well, and he started to get harassed. Now, William Fish went to the police and said, look, you need to help me because I'm being harassed and they haven't done nothing. Now, this is the interesting part with the dog. So a man called Peter Taylor from Preston, he offered police his bloodhound called Morgan and his Clumber Spaniel, who we don't know the name of. Now, at this time, dogs were not used by the police, but this case changed it all. So this man, Peter Taylor, came from Preston to Blackburn, and, you know, with his little dogs. They were taken to where Emily's torso was found to kind of get the scent, in the hopes that they might be able to find the rest of her body, but there was no hit. She weren't there. They then took the dogs to the barber shop. The dogs went upstairs and they were by the fireplace, and Morgan started barking and like howling to get officers' attention. So officers looked up the chimney and sadly, wrapped in Emily's little clothes was Emily's skull and arms, which had been half burnt, where he'd obviously tried to burn her in the fireplace and then hid her remains of it. William Fish was arrested. On April 17th, he went to the magistrates and he was charged with murder, and he confessed. He said that he had seen Emily that day and he had asked her to go and get him some tobacco. When she returned with the tobacco, we took her upstairs. He raped her. Bear in mind, this little girl is 7. This man has kids himself. So he takes her upstairs, rapes her, cuts her throat, and then cuts her up. He then distributes the body parts, dumps the legs one place, dumps the torso another, tries to burn the skull and arms unsuccessfully, and then he hides them up the fireplace. So Fisher's trial was during July. News reports at the time described him as short. He was 5'2", which is short for a man. He was described as very gaunt. He tried to plead insanity, but the jury and the judge didn't fall for it. They were like, lad, sort your head out. You're not insane. You knew exactly what you were doing, mate. So on August 4th, which was a Friday, he was found guilty and he was sentenced to death. 6 days later, August 10th, he was able to say his final goodbyes to his wife and kids and family, which I don't like. I mean, I get, because I do get it, but like, Emily didn't have a chance to say goodbye to her family, to her mum and dad, to her friends, to her family. It just pisses me off that, like, he was able to do this and get the dignity of saying goodbye to his friends and family. Now, I get it was probably done more for his wife and kids and that, but it still annoys me. At 8 AM, 26-year-old Fish was executed at Kirkdale Jail in Liverpool. His last statement said, "If I had my time over again, I would have had a different life. It is not too late for you. If I had served God instead of Satan, I should not have been here." Now, he said this to people like him, other paedophile child rapists, basically saying, don't do what I've done because it's not worth it. And then he was hung. And I haven't wrote it down, but I'm sure I read that he was cremated. And his ashes were scattered by the jail. So that was the case of Morgan the dog, who is probably one of our first ever police dogs who caught a killer. I've kind of got a suspicion that if it weren't for the man in Preston saying to the police, "Oh, here's me dog," and finding Emily's remains, I've got a feeling that he would have been one of those people who feel a little cocky and think they've got away with something and then go on to do it again. Thankfully that didn't happen. It's just sad that, you know, a little baby girl lost her life in such a brutal, inhumane way. I mean, she was 7. Anyway, I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Take care.